feel like in the last 5 years, I certainly have not been dancing nearly as much as I
Right.
used to. But I think also it's because we don't really drink alcohol.
Yeah.
And
We
there's
don't
not
go
really,
out and
yeah,
don't do this stuff.
there's not really a place for us to go dancing.
Right.
Because when you're not drunk or intoxicated and you dance with other people who are drunk or intoxicated, you're kind of not on the same wavelength.
Yes.
But we've been dancing a lot in our garage.
I mean, what a better place to dance if it's not your garage?
I mean, the freedom of doing whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important health wise, mental health wise, and physical health to dance. It's like, I don't know, something with being a human, moving your body to music.
I completely agree. There's nothing better than dancing. I mean, it's great cardio.
Yeah.
It's fun. You can dance to anything you want, anything
Yeah.
you like. And yeah, we love it.
We do love it.
You should dance too.
Yeah. And if you haven't heard Charlie XCX's new album,
It's our new favorite album. We've been listening on repeat. Check it out if you like some dance music.
yeah, I feel like you can listen to it from the beginning to the end and repeat over and over again and just keep dancing for hours. And that's what we did last night.
Yeah. We are big fans of Charlie for a few years now, and
Yeah.
we've been eagerly waiting for the dance album, and it's finally here. And we were dancing yesterday in our garage for hours.
Yeah, I think it's also why I wore this shirt because it reminds me of when Renaissance came out. It
Yes.
was such a dance heavy album and we were vibing that whole summer. And if you don't like dance music or this is not your taste in music, I totally get it. Obviously, music is extremely subjective, but if
Well,
you just want
maybe
to,
maybe now it's time to try new things. Maybe you're gonna love it. Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah. I mean, everyone that we've introduced the album to loves it so far. So what do you think? Check out Charlie XCX's Brat. Let us know in the comments what you think below. But if you don't like it, you don't have to comment.
Or if you like it and if you like dance music, do you have any recommendations,
Yes.
suggestions? We love to hear new music, and
Yeah,
thank you
especially
for
music from the 70s, 80s,
yes.
90s, before we were born, which is I was born in 1990, but anything before that, if you have recommendations, dance, house music, stuff we can just jam to all night in the garage, please let us know because dancing not only is good for your mental health, your physical health, but it's a great bonding activity. And if you and your partner are bored on a Friday night, go in your garage or go in your spare room or go right where you typically hang out and blare the music.
And let it go. Let
Party
it
all night.
all go and have fun.
Yeah, that's what music is about. So, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today we're here.
To talk about the shame around sex.
Yeah, we're going to kind of take you through our journey from being a child to a teen to late teen to adult
Wow.
and how
Big
all of that-
topic.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get through it all today, but we like to be ambitious.
Yes.
And so
Stick around. We will try our best here. But let's start with the beginning of our
Yeah,
lives, right?
Exactly.
Let's start back in the day. You were a child, a baby.
You're a child, you're a baby.
We had no notions of sex in different parts of our bodies. We had no idea what it meant to be naked around other kids
Yeah.
and why we were different from the girls and
Mhm.
why we're not talking about our parts to our parents. Let's go back to those times.
Yes, our parts. This is what we should title chapter 1. Our parts. So I remember vividly the first time that I saw like the opposite sex's sort of naked body. At least this may not be the first, because we have these memories in our mind that sometimes we make up, sometimes we sort of change around. But I have this vivid memory when I was maybe 5 or 6, and I have all female cousins. My grandma had a pool growing up, so I remember jumping in the pool butt naked
Wow.
with my 2 girl cousins. And I remember at some point realizing like, hey, I have something different. And I remember them pointing it out to me, but it was like a 1-minute section of the whole
Yes.
day. Like it was not a conversation piece. It wasn't a big deal, right? And the parents also did not make it a big deal. It's like,
Right.
a bunch of kids jumping in the pool naked. So I and everyone, my 2 cousins, we can interpret that. We can see the vibes. We can see what our parents are doing. When you're a kid, you're constantly looking for feedback
Yes.
about the environment
Yes.
around you. So, looking at your parents and realizing that this was okay, this was cool. And I just remember feeling like a free in my head, like a free dolphin, just like leather or like that rubber skin, just like flailing in the pool with my cousins. And it felt very free. At least in my
Yeah.
head. Do you remember the first time that you like realized your nakedness in comparison to your sisters? Because you grew up with 2 girls as well.
I grew up with 2 girls, but I don't remember much about my sisters in particular. I did have a best friend, a girl, who was my mom's best friend, and we were born a few weeks apart. We're actually supposed to get married when we get older and have babies and all of that, but no. And I remember taking a shower with her. We were very young
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
and I remember we will play with each other in the shower naked. Silliness. We
Right.
didn't know what we were doing. But I don't remember having the consciousness that, oh, we're different, so we have to be separate. It was we're always together from babies to like kids until it was time for us to not take showers together anymore.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in my head, I think the reason why I also go back to this moment is because very soon after that, my grandma used to babysit kids, and there was this girl. She's maybe a year younger than me, but I was like 6, so she was maybe 5. And so we decided we wanted to play doctor, which I think is a
Mm,
common sort of
yes.
game that young kids play. I think we see on TV representation of people kind of figuring out their bodies, and your doctor helps you figure out your body. You go to the doctor, you get naked in front
Yeah.
of the doctor.
And we're
But
curious about the other parts, right?
right. And so I think it's like a game of curiosity, but also just sort of like also understanding your own body.
Discovery.
Yeah. And I remember we were playing doctor. I think the door was open, like we weren't hiding anything. And my grandma walked by and was like, no, this is not happening. Because again, she was like, it's funny, my mom and her mom are friends. And so,
Yes.
but it's like not family also, which probably added a layer of like, oh my God, my grandma was probably thinking this girl's gonna go home and tell her mom that. And what did she do? She went home and told her mom that we played doctor today, which is, I think, a great conversation to have to beginning to sort of understand um, your body, the
Yes.
bodies around you. But I think what happens is a lot of times parents or, they kind of go to the worst case scenario
Yes.
and freak out. And I
Mm-hmm.
just remember getting kind of like in trouble, but not really understanding why. And it was like my first experience of like, this is your body, this is their body.
You
You're not
cannot
supposed
do
to
that.
look, you're not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to touch. And so it was so different than that same period of my life where I'm jumping in a pool
Right.
naked.
There was a drastic change.
Yes.
I remember too, my cousin and I would get naked and see each other's parts, and we wouldn't touch, just look. And I remember we were caught this one time, and it was a big drama in our family. I was afraid because at that point I already knew that I was gay because I was very
Mm-hmm.
flamboyant and I like girl stuff, so I knew it was different. So I knew I was doing something wrong. For him, he's straight, so I think he never thought that was a serious thing, but for my whole family, it was something bad. And I knew
Wow.
I couldn't do that again, or if I did, I couldn't be discovered.
It's interesting your interpretation of how he responded to the same situation, right? You're
Yes,
both kids doing the
yes.
same thing, both get in trouble, but you like feel like your world is,
Ashamed,
yes, ending.
guilty, and for him, eh,
I mean, and maybe not. Maybe his story is different. We don't have him
right.
here to ask, but that was your interpretation of it. But certainly, these sort of experiences start to build in our mind the
Shame around sex and feeling guilty about the
the
way that,
nakedness or
yeah,
your exposure or you're supposed to keep this guarded. This is yours, and there's a lot of truth to that, of course, as well. And of course, you want to teach kids like, hey, no one is supposed to
yeah,
touch you there. No one is supposed to see you there. But I think there needs to be a little bit more of like a transition between jump in a pool butt naked with everyone
yeah,
seeing versus you need to be clothed at all times. And what's interesting to me is when this all started happening, I would say around 7 or 8, I started realizing too, I didn't want anyone to see me. So I used to
yeah.
wear these giant t-shirts. My mom would like have old shirts that I would start sleeping in that were like double XL. And if I was sitting in a shirt and little shorts for like around the house, like boxers or something like that, I would always like pull my knees up and pull my shirt over. I
Wow.
didn't want anyone to see my body. And it's such a change, right? I'm interpreting how I felt at that time. I didn't write a journal or any of those things, but I always look back to like that kid who never wanted anyone to see him. And that was
Yeah.
probably like 7 to like 11 or 12 before, I was like, all right, I can't wear these shirts. They look like dresses. Did you
That's
ever feel shy or like ashamed of people seeing you, you know?
very shy, especially growing up as a kid and then as a teenager, even more. I hid myself from even my parents.
Hmm.
I was completely ashamed of my body growing up,
Really?
mostly because I didn't, obviously, as a kid, I didn't love the way I look. It's funny to talk about those things because growing up, you never understand why you're feeling that way. And I
Hmm.
feel a lot of these feelings came from being queer and being gay and
Hmm.
feeling guilty for not. liking girls and
Mm-hmm.
guilty for not doing what the boys were doing. So I feel like all those feelings came because of that.
Yeah.
But I remember I was very shy about my body. Teenager, I became even more secluded,
Yeah.
more private.
Yeah, I think what's interesting as well is around that time frame, I also started to realize, 7 to 11-ish, that I was attracted to a certain type of guy and men, and I liked masculine sort of attraction in comparison to feminine. And I was like, oh God, I'm gay. So that's a whole nother topic that I experienced at that time. But I started like trying to figure out what was the popular image of masculinity, what looked like a normal male. And at 7 to 12, I was maybe 20 pounds,
Yeah.
soaking wet, skinny as a board, looked very girlish, like very young.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely hated my body too. It was
Yeah.
another reason I would like, start wearing more shirts, not never be shirtless. Which is
Yeah.
funny now I'm always shirtless, but back then it was like I hate the way I look, I hate my sexuality, and it was just the beginning. So
Yeah.
much to still learn from that point.
Yeah.
Do you remember something similar?
I do. I remember hating the process of getting to puberty because I really
Yes.
like to be a kid. And I hate the fact that I was growing hair, I was melting under my armpits. I hate the fact that I was growing up. I remember this one time I was starting to get excited and aroused. I asked my mom if I was okay, if everything was okay down there.
Yes.
So no, you're fine. You're just becoming a man.
It's so funny. I never have had a single conversation to my memory about like any sort of sexual part of my body. I've never told my parents, oh, I got my first erection or any of those things because I was so distant. I think as I was kind of going through my 7 to 11 change, I also started getting really invested into religion because my mom had decided
Mm,
it was best for me to go to a private school for middle school. And so she started, taking me to church more often. And granted, I'm not Catholic, which I think is probably another route people experience. But being Southern Baptist or Methodist
yeah.
Christian, we were ingrained from like kids, like Adam and Eve. They got
Wow.
naked
Yeah.
and broke the rules, and God punished them, and that's why we're here. Something along those lines. You guys get the story. But it just all started feeling like everything was turning against who I was
Yeah.
as I was going through this period, right? Like, first of all, you can't be gay because it's just not what your parents allow.
And sex is wrong.
Yes, sex, first of all, is already wrong. So anything that you're expressing your sexuality, and when you're gay, you're constantly thinking about your
Right.
sexuality. It's like,
Yes, it's a constant reminder that
yes,
you're doing something wrong, you're thinking about something wrong, that you're not supposed to do that.
right,
I grew up Catholic, I went to a Christian school, but my parents were not very religious. We
sure.
wouldn't go to church very much. The only time we go to church was for a wedding or a funeral.
Yeah,
So we never frequent the church very much. I did went to Catholic classes. Christian school was very intense.
right.
But I never felt like religion was pushing me away from who I was. I felt like the society was pushing me away from who I was, and
Right.
myself too, because I hid that. I try to convert. I try to watch straight porn. Have you ever tried to watch straight
Oh
porn?
my gosh, many times. Many times as a kid, right? Like I
Yes.
would say probably like the introduction of pornography started for me like around 13, 12, 13, 14, 15. As the rise of computers were
Yes.
accessible, it would take forever to download a
Yes.
video.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say that I had many opportunities to watch straight porn, but because I'd have to wait and I'd be like, I'm just gonna go
It's
for the
not
gold.
worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. What's so funny too is this is actually a great point because around that time, again, so I was starting to get indoctrinated into religion. I knew sex was already bad. I knew my sexuality was different, which was always a sort of thought process in my head. And so I already felt super shamed and guilty. But when you are going through puberty, your hormones are raging. You literally cannot
Yes.
control your appetite for
Yes.
some sort of release and understanding of what's going on. And so I remember I would download porn. I would wait 60 minutes for like a 5-minute clip.
Yes.
I would get through 60 seconds as a kid, right? Like
Yes.
you don't have any need to continue it. You're trying,
No.
for me, I was like, let's get in and out, let's get this over with. And afterwards,
You delete it. You're
you don't
done. You
understand.
feel terrible. It's the worst feeling as a kid.
So that release, the release of all those sort of hormones, release of all those sort of relaxation chemicals that come in our brain after you climax, as a kid, you don't understand what's going on because your
Yes.
personality, it feels like your
Yes.
personality
Change.
changes.
Yes.
You're like, because you don't understand that it's just this drive, this
Yes.
hormone push. It's biological.
Yes.
It's a part of nature and evolution. When you climax as a kid, you're like, how did my personality just change
Yeah.
in 30 seconds? You delete the account, you delete the computer, you throw
In
it out
one
the
minute.
window, and you
And you promise yourself you're never gonna do this
never going to
again.
do it again. You shower after, you cry, you repent. I mean, I went through all of those things every time, and then I would go back, a week later and download the video and
A
wait.
week later, 2 hours later, I was in the
Right.
same website, downloaded the same video.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And so those were the sort of cycles that I went
Yes.
through between the early sort of use of pornography
And this is
and
daily, right?
exploration.
It's all day, every day. You're thinking about sex. You wanna
Right.
release those hormones as a
Yes.
kid, and you don't understand what's going on, and you cannot
Mm-mm.
talk to anybody. And I remember this one time I shared a computer with my sisters and my mom, and there was this specific time that I was on a computer with my sister, older sister, and she tried to search something on Google, and she found my gay porn search.
Oh.
She froze for a few seconds, but then she didn't say anything. Obviously, she saw, but we never talked about it. And I
Wow.
felt terrible for weeks because I knew I was
How
discovered
did you know?
because she was right next to me.
Oh my God. Yeah. My mom discovered, I recall, some sort of pop-up. It was actually very funny. I still see the pop-up in
The
my. So there
pop-ups.
was a pop-up that came up and it said, "How gay are you?" And then
Oh
it
no.
was like a clip. And if you watched the clip for a certain amount of time, it was like, but you didn't really see what was going on. But if you focused, it was an act of two men getting it on. But what was interesting for me too is I feel like, so I'm not against pornography. I think it's a healthy thing you can do in moderation. There's definitely a lot of controversy around it, and there's certain things that are extreme, and certainly young people accessing it is very confusing. So I certainly wish there was another option for young people to have mature conversations with
Yes.
adults or find some sort of method of kind of figuring things out, because that didn't happen for me. But I remember the image of all the men on those websites,
Yes.
and I was like, not, I didn't look anything like them.
Oh
They
my
were
God. Not
jacked,
even
they
close.
were model-esque, they were super fit, super strong, hyper masculine. And I'm
Yeah.
like sitting here in my Tweety Bird extra large t-shirt that's over my knees, like, this is just not going to work for me. But those sort of pressures too added in, this shame of sex where we have to go through these back doors to access information and understand what's going on, the limitation of feeling unable to talk to your parents, all that shame. And then adding into the fact that when you do access the information, it's like the best looking people doing things that
Yes.
you probably feel like you never could or never could look like that. It was just a lot. It was a lot of self-hate happening at a very young age.
It's almost like social media now. Back then, we will see porn and other guys on porn,
Right.
and they look jacked and they look incredible. And like, oh my God, I'm never gonna be able to achieve that. But
Yeah.
I guess I'm just gonna watch him
I'm just gonna watch for my 60 seconds and then delete the download, close the computer, and come back whenever is necessary.
a
But
few
yeah,
hours later.
a few hours later for some of us. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just unfortunate because all those things, they do have an impact on our psyche and how we evolve and how
Yes.
we mature. And there's really no great answer to what to do on how to educate your kids, in my opinion, which is what makes adulthood and having children so difficult, is passing down that very fragile information.
Especially around the time that computers became so popular, it was a different time for parents to raise kids because information is there.
Yeah.
You can just access, you can just Google it, you can just watch videos, and then you can just delete it right after. So it was a different time growing up in the 90s and 2000s. The information was now
Everywhere.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think looking back, I definitely believe the internet raised me in that area of my life. I certainly, again, was not confident or strong enough to go to my parents to ask these questions. I personally had a very poor experience in health class, maybe going to a religious school. I mean, it was more like biology and
Yes.
less like, this is where babies come from. This is how babies are made. This is
Yes.
what adults do when they're married or when they've committed to themselves. Because I actually did not know where babies came from until I was in high school, which is hilarious. And in fact, I
Wow.
didn't know where babies came from until I was around 15 because my cousin had a baby and they knew I
Wow.
wanted to be a doctor, was interested in medicine. So my aunt was like, "Oh, you should come into the room." I don't know looking back if she was
Mm-hmm.
actually trying to freak me out because she's kind of cuckoo, but that's family. But I ended up being in the room holding my cousin's leg while she was having a baby,
How old were you?
15.
Oh, wow.
So it was a great experience. Like it definitely helped me understand medicine and made me commit to, okay, I can handle this. It also opened my eyes to this whole other world of health
Yes.
that at 15 I had not been exposed to. But it's interesting. I think that there really should be some emphasis placed on this type of education. I know some comments we get from people who were educated in the 70s, 80s, 90s had a better health
Yeah.
experience. So it's sort of weird to see things going backwards.
Wow.
When we look around, like imagine the school board confrontations and all these crazy things that we see happening,
Oh my
especially
God.
here in Florida. It's important that this education gets out there so kids, especially LGBTQ plus, don't feel that additional
Mm-hmm.
shame and misunderstanding, confusion. But hopefully that does change in the future.
Did your parents ever give you a condom?
Never,
Never.
never. So yeah, again, going through church, we're also taught about virginity. Did
Yes.
you ever kind of have that
You know,
importance?
again, because my parents are not very religious, so there's not much talk about virginity. I remember my parents, my mom specifically, she gave me condoms at some point. I was around 14, 15, and I remember when that happened, I thought, well, I'm not gonna need that. Don't worry. I'm not getting anyone pregnant.
That being said, that was very smart and wise of your mom. I think in
Yes.
general, like
I mean,
let's
obviously,
not have babies just
exactly.
in
And
case.
STDs, why
Right.
not?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely applaud your mom. For me, I remember this overarching importance of virginity. Obviously, it was taught to me at church, which then led into home. And so virginity in my head was this concept that it was your prized possession. You had to hold on to it.
Wow.
Someone would steal it from you or take it from you. Demonic forces were out there trying to separate it from you. And once you lost it, you were broken. You would never be loved. You would never be able to have a committed, fulfilling relationship because your partner would
Yeah.
feel abused by the fact that you had something
Corrupted.
taken away or
Yeah.
given away to someone else. And so all those thoughts, again, just rushing through my head at all times. I remember even carrying it into my first relationship, despite the fact that I had no longer had my virginity, thinking like, oh, this is going to be a one relationship situation. I'm going to marry this person and stay with them
Wow.
forever.
Even as a gay relationship, you had those
Yeah.
feelings and
Yeah.
thoughts.
Exactly. At 18, which is
Wow.
one of the reasons I actually stayed in a
Mm-hmm.
very bad relationship, which looking back, the person's fine. We just weren't meant to be together. And I don't have any negative feelings for them. But that's one of the reasons why I stayed in a situation that was not best for me because I thought I'm only supposed to be with one person. This will like cap
Yeah.
me off. I won't add anyone else to my lost virginity list, right? Did you ever like feel shame or burden for like the amount of people that you would encounter or
For me, it was actually the opposite. I lost my virginity late in life. Actually, I lost my virginity with my first boyfriend.
oh,
And I think a lot of that was because I was ashamed of my body and I didn't want to be with another person, another
yeah,
guy in that case. Naked. I just felt guarded about my body. I didn't want to expose myself, not until late teenage
yeah,
years. But I remember my straight friends, they would lose their virginities, and I would be so jealous of the process of them talking about how fun was to have sex and how fun was to get it on girls all the time. And I was always sad that I couldn't experience that, and I was sad that I didn't want to lose my virginity with girls.
right.
I was just waiting for the right moment, the right person, but
Yes,
living in a very conservative city, in a very conservative bubble, I
yeah,
never had the opportunity, not until I was 18, to get out of my city and meet somebody else. And I was always afraid too, if I try to lose my virginity with a guy, what if I was discovered? What if
yeah,
somebody found out? And that
right.
will make everything worse, and I'll feel very sad. But
Yeah, I remember going to Orlando, which I talked about in other episodes, where I would drive a couple hours to be able to spend time with a friend of mine who lived there. And it was a much more open, liberal city than Jacksonville at the time. And so I could go there and kind of, experience a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I remember realizing that I was going to kind of leave this virginity, religion, lifestyle behind me so that I could step into this exploration phase of my life. And because there was so much shame around that, and I felt so disconnected from my family, disconnected from my community because I was so different, I really started to lean into this rebellious phase, which I, looking back, enjoyed. I think
Yes.
it definitely added a lot of character to who I am today, and a lot of my learning experiences, both painful and not so painful, came from that phase of my life. But looking back, I really wish I didn't have to be rebellious. I wish that I could have had a better streamlined experience of understanding what my body was going through, feel normal, feel like just an average guy who was going through puberty, had questions for their parents, looked up some stuff online,
Yeah.
realized what was good for me, what wasn't, and got to move on. Whereas I had to really dive into my sexuality alone.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back again, I made so many mistakes that could have been costly, could have definitely put me back much further. But
Mm-hmm.
luckily, God or universe or whoever you believe in, I personally am atheist, but, you know, something was guiding me and allowing me to avoid some very big mistakes while still making some along the way. So it's hard to say that process helped me become who I am
I
today.
believe so. Every choice that you made in life made who you are today. So
Absolutely.
you're
That's
here. Let's celebrate that.
yeah, that's everybody. And this was a very, very broad topic to talk about the shame that, is associated with sex and how as a young person we try to navigate these complex feelings. And even so, I just wanted to sit here and have this conversation with you because growing up in Brazil, growing up in America, we
Completely
have
different experience, but at the same time, very similar.
exactly.
Growing up gay in a conservative, religious family, we
Yeah.
have similar stories. It's funny because we come from such a different backgrounds, but still the stories are there, the experiences are there, and the way we felt very similar. Growing up in our childhood and then teenage years, having to hide our parts from our parents and our family and hide our thoughts and our feelings and
Yeah.
our sexuality in general. We couldn't be sexual around our peers. We couldn't talk about sex. We couldn't talk about losing our virginities
Right.
because you're gonna talk that with your friends. They're gonna think you are a
Nuts.
freak. Yeah.
Yes, a freak is a great way to describe it. That's how they would refer to other LGBTQ plus people that
Hmm.
were in my school or were around. And so, yeah, you didn't want to be that. And looking back, I think again, these things are so uniquely LGBTQ plus. It brings us together. Having these
Yes.
conversations may not be the most, first thing that comes to your mind when you meet someone,
No.
but there's so much we can discuss that brings us together as a community. And that's what I hope these conversations continue to do is sort of help us form a
A
community
stronger
together.
community and
Yeah.
open dialogue and share incredible stories that sometimes are buried in our memories,
Hmm.
in our thoughts, but it's important to let it all go and let it all out and la la la.
Yeah, and I don't want the responsibility of teaching the youth. That's not what these videos or these episodes
No,
are intended to do. But if maybe some kid out there is lost, know you're not alone. These are complex, crazy
it's
feelings.
part of the process. Everyone feels the same way. It's important to go through this
Phase.
phase of your life, you know.
Yeah, figure things out. You're not alone, and it does get better. It's so funny when I was younger, they were still saying that phrase to me. It gets better, it gets better, and it really does. I'm in my mid 30s now, and it continues every year to get
It
better.
gets better.
I start to understand myself a little more every day.
I think the best advice that people would give me in the past, and I never listened to very much, was the advice that people would say, enjoy this time because you're never gonna
Yes.
get back. You're not young forever, so just enjoy it because when you're young, you can do a lot of things.
Yeah, when you're young, the rebellious phases that you can go through, that feeling like you can't be defeated, you're unstoppable, enjoy that.
Yeah,
Make wise decisions, don't go crazy, but do know that this time is very unique.
and
It's very
valuable and
short,
hmm
and try not to stress because soon you'll be an adult and the
you will
stress
have the
continues.
answers to everything
Right.
or not.
But thank you so much for taking some time to listen to another episode of Relations Pod. It is so much fun getting to talk about these issues with you, these questions, comments. And if you have
Stories, experience,
additional
questions,
things,
stories to tell us, please leave in the comments. We will love to hear from you. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to our channel, like, post, share.
drop a pin, tell your friend, tell your neighbor. I don't know. Help us build this community bigger so that we can all form something bigger
Yeah.
than us.
Strong, stronger than yesterday.
It gets better or it gets butter, depending on if you watch Drag Race or not. That's a deep cut. Anyways, we look forward to seeing you next week, or if you're listening, getting to chat with you next week. Until then,
See you,
hasta la vista.
baby. Do you remember the gay quizzes on the internet?
I would fail every gay quiz.
100% gay.
Well, it's funny because the questions would be like, "Who's your favorite singer?" So I would be like, "Well, it says Britney Spears here, but I can't click that because they're
Right.
definitely gonna call me." Or, "What's your favorite color?" I do like blue, but I also like red. Together they make purple. Better not pick purple because that's gay. Or, "Which room identifies with you the most?" And it'd be like an inflatable neon chair. Do you remember those?
I
Was that a
do.
thing? They had them on The
Yeah.
Sims.
Yes.
I loved
Very
that vibe.
popular. 2000s.
It would be like
Neon Nights.
there'd be like 14 questions, and I'd after the second question be like, "Gay."
There was no escape. Sometimes, like you said, you would just do something different, click things that you
Yes.
normally wouldn't. Still gay.
Still gay.
You know why? Because if you're doing the
You're
quiz,
gay.
you're gay.